Welcome to Ask a Therapist, a show where qualified therapists stop by to answer all your questions. Hey you, welcome to another episode of Ask a Therapist. This is the show by Legally Clueless Africa where you get to send in your questions and then keep listening for one of our counselors or therapists will drop by and answer your question. So a quick note, in the show notes, there is a link to our question form. Drop your question there and you can do so using a pseudonym if you want to send it in anonymously. All right, back to this season. We are every Friday hanging out with Aldo, who is an incredible therapist right here in Nairobi with such good energy and so much knowledge. In this episode, we talk all things masculinity in the African context. And now, let's get right into answering all your questions. So, Aldo's back. I feel like I'm just going to make that into like a jingle. Dun, 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 dun. Aldo's back. All right, the question in this episode is, what are African men often struggling to heal from psychologically? And do you have tips on how they can navigate this? Especially, hey, it's relevant to what was trending even yesterday, goodness, but it's relevant across. But your thoughts?
Looking at my own context is very, very interesting. And you grow up with certain things that you're told, and it doesn't have to remain the case. When you say like an African man, usually there's tenets that are there in terms of whether he's firm, whether he's uncompromised. You know, those ideas for like people are in the house watching TV, then the car pulls up and people just scatter.
Yes.
That's home. And
it was gone.
That kind of stuff, the stoicism of fixed point, provision, not really feeling. And I think it does a lot of men a disservice. Because when it comes to emotions, one, we all have them. And so a lot of them are kind of sealed off in terms of you're not supposed to have access to these things. And so you feel like you're wrong for having them. You'll be like, but if I was an African man for real, I wouldn't be sad. That's not the way that works. And so the thing I feel about it is, we have to allow ourselves to experience the full emotional spectrum, but be there for each other in those spaces to make that a reality. So a lot of the times when somebody tries that, it's another African man who will mock him and say, you shouldn't be doing those kind of things. He might be harboring a lot of pain, but what he's seen or what he's being told, maybe explicitly or implicitly, is you're not supposed to access. You need to bury that down deep. And that leads to a lot of destructive things where you see relationships between fathers and sons, and it's hard. And it's like maybe some softness was required, and it's like softness makes you weak, and it's like, no, like everything in moderation. It's those elements where there's times to be hard, there's times to be tough, there's times to feel, there's times to be still. And it's about doing all of that, not just let's say the small fraction of things which we say it's true, because men suffer. And now in my position where I see people, somebody will come in and you'll give them the space and the outpouring of things which are present that are coming out now because there's nowhere else where they can. It's like, who are you supposed to tell? And I've had conversations with men about this. I've been privileged in like many forums. Sometimes I've talked to women about it, and it's like, how would you feel if he actually expressed how he felt? And when I talk about the messiness of the emotions, people will recoil and be like, well, he's not supposed to be feeling things. And I'm like, there has to be room. So if somebody is going to try and do this, there has to be space for them to do so without ridicule. And so for African men, young and old, the thing that I'd say is that one, it's never too late. People say, I'm too old. I'm like, no. It's just the work is hard. So you might say, I can't do it. Everybody's capable. But make the space with your peers first and those who are close to you. So we can't wake up and change the world. But your friends, your siblings, those are where you start in terms of have those conversations. When you ask how somebody is, really ask.
Yeah.
And be like, no, I actually want to know. The answer doesn't have to be fine. If you're having those conversations, for example, alcohol doesn't always have to be involved. Feeling isn't, you drink and then you feel looser and you do those kind of things, but they don't have to be tied together. Make time for for the men who are close to you in your lives, and you'll see those bonds build. And that's where you start. That's what I try to do with my friends since I was about a teenager. There was things I was struggling with, and I was like, I want more than this. But the starting point was, I'm like, I will share, and then I will ask, and that's how I guess trust is built. I was like, here we can actually talk. Yeah, we're going to joke and do all those other things, but there needs to be space. And we have to be the ones who start it, because, I mean, it's for us.
Exactly. And like in the African context, there's like two things on the outside. I have never been an African man, so I'm outside looking in, okay? I feel like there's a cultural context of being the provider that made sense in like older, not only made sense, was practical in past times. I feel like there's another thing you can put on Ruto's head, but it's also Ruto Uhuru, like it's been a while. It's in some and not some, in many more situations now, it's not practical, right? And I think there's many men who battle with that. And not only men, there's many women as well who battle with that, right? Because it then also requires us to have a shift in how we view men, a shift from how we've been socialized to view men and to want men to arrive in relationships, right? And so I don't know, I feel like that's something that a lot of men are struggling to navigate.
No, it's a huge thing, because now provision is a massive one, right? But are you a man solely because you can provide? If your answer to that was yes, then it really messes you up if you can't. Because it's not just a matter of, I can't put food on the table or, keep a roof over our heads. It's, I'm no longer a man. Every day that's in the balance.
Yeah.
So that is panic inducing. But the fact of the matter is, of course, you want to provide, but that's not all that you are. But you also have to work on being more than just that. So if you thought this is all I have to do and not work on anything else, then you can feel like you're being shortchanged. But if all you said, it's like people who lead with that, provider, full stop, and then something goes left, it's like, but those are the terms that you introduced.
Yeah.
So if it goes and that's all you worked on, it can be difficult. The women conversation is interesting because as things shift, there's stuff that we want to change, but the stuff we want to hold on to, all in the same, can't do that. If you're saying if women are doing things for themselves, and then some, I have heard, and this is not me saying everybody, that element of in relationships for like, I have my own money, but what's mine is mine and what's his is ours.
Yeah, I've heard it too.
How does that work?
Yes,
No, but I'm the woman. And I'm like, now I am confused, because when we were speaking 5 minutes ago, it was very progressive. But now we fall back into a role which is comfortable because of the benefits it provides you. But if we're changing, that means it's wholesale change, where, as you were talking about practicality, where it's going to take both of you. And are you still going to respect him if it takes? And if you can't, then you need to ask yourself, how also do you view him, and what's valuable to you? And that's what makes it uncomfortable, because we're not doing it by ourselves. We don't exist by ourselves. So for the guys, you'd say we have to do that work, but also the woman you relate with, how does she view you? And so many guys will fall into that because maybe they tried and the woman wasn't willing to accept that. And that's an example of a situation. And so change is uncomfortable. That's the thing about it, almost like by its very definition.
Yeah.
As we're grappling to find like new identities, the thing with a lot of men when we have conversations is, if you want to be more than this, you have to work on more than this. So if you're saying you're not just a provider, okay, what else? And are you actually putting effort into making that come to fruition? Because if you're not, then when these things are shifting, you're going to be left with, this only thing I had is gone. And now you start grappling, and people can lash out and you can feel scared, insecure, or because they're guys, usually that comes through the lens of, I'm angry about something. In reality, maybe he's just hurt, and maybe he's just confused, because they're confusing times.
And I like that, because it's like, if all you are is a provider in terms of your identity, before we even get to how that affects you in a relationship, just as a person, that when you said it, I was just like, oh my God, that's so scary. Like, what am I without this thing that I based my entire identity around, And then so much is out of your control. As I said, it's not just a joke mentioning Ruto and Uhuru, but there's things that can happen in a country that will affect whether you are a provider or not. And it's beyond your control. So there's got to be a lot more. The other thing I wanted to touch on is on intimacy, because when we talk about men being in touch with their emotions and being able to communicate that, I was reading that men don't know how to ask for intimacy. And so they rely on sex to get that intimacy. And I was like, oh, hang on. Like, what is going on there? And so I feel like even the push for, to be a real man means you have slept with so many women and you automatically know these things. There's been no sex education, but you just woke up one morning and you all know this because you're a man. How can a man navigate that wanting intimacy that's not necessarily tied to sex?
That's interesting because intimacy that's about softness. That's what that is. And so now it's getting to the point where you don't try to amputate those parts of yourself. Because even like from sex, if you're looking at it as like a dominant thing or the way you describe it, like I took her, I did this, but then, and even sometimes men will be insulted like, oh, when you wanted to cuddle, then people laugh. It's like, okay, but what's wrong with cuddling? What are we saying? Are we saying that even in the bedroom, he just has to be stone-faced and be like, I derive no pleasure from anything? So I think a lot of the time we all have it wrong. If the intimacy is softness, then it's the practice of, as I was saying previously, being more in touch with those parts of yourself and starting off slowly. But then also the people who you're interacting with, you want to hope that it's somebody who you can have that negotiation with. Because it can be painful for men if they try it and the woman will reject it, sometimes violently so, with like derision, like, what do you mean? That stuff. And obviously you need to work through that, but a lot of them will climb shut and be like, okay, I'm going to use this as the example for not all women.
Yeah.
Which is awful because not all of them are like that. And so a lot of these experiences, some people can be unlucky in that you have somebody who is very careless with your emotions. For a lot of boys, sometimes with their mothers, they teach them you're not supposed to, button that stuff up. Don't feel it, don't experience it. And even if they decide to do that work, it takes a long time to get back out of it. But back to even previously when we were talking about the spaces men occupy, talking about that with your guy friends as well, in terms of now from these things, what are these things that you're looking for? And they'll be like, actually, I just like spending time. And then holding the space and someone not being like, haha, he likes love and affection.
Yeah.
What a loser. It's like,
Why?
Do you mean?
Yeah.
I like spending time with somebody. I like somebody who appreciates my company and I appreciate them in return. Those are all really lovely things. Let's stop pretending like we don't enjoy them and there's something wrong with you for doing so. Because that element of trying to be hard and trying to be tough, you hear people say it and you're looking at them like, but you don't even live that way. In the public sphere, we're trying to maintain a facade, but then when nobody's around, you're not even allowed. So if it's not benefiting anybody, let's try and stop. But it takes let's say a confidence and assuredness. Because men sometimes want to like pull your card and call you on things. Start starting to like define your manhood. And it's like, I'm not going to apologize for wanting to connect with somebody in this way. You can choose to do what it is that you want to do, but that's the importance of it. Now it's the courage to be able to stand for, let's call them softer things. And I don't mean soft in a derogatory sense. That's just what they are. But we need the mixture. Sometimes you need the hardness, sometimes you need the softness. Either one by themselves is unhealthy. So it's about that mixture.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it's one that you can share with anybody, or even if it's you, who is trying to figure out their own identity outside of older cultural norms. Remember, if you want to book a one-on-one therapy session with Aldo, in the show notes, there is a link to his social platforms. All you got to do is drop him a DM. It's as simple as that. He not only does one-on-one therapy, but also couple therapy, family therapy, which quite a few of our families need. and so much more. Make sure you follow him on his socials as well, because he does share a lot of insightful videos touching on different topics that affect our day-to-day when it comes to our healing journey. Catch Ask a Therapist every Friday right here on Legally Clueless Africa. That's all for this episode. If you have a question to ask a therapist, please drop it in our question form. A link to it is in the show notes. Catch you next week for the next episode of Ask a Therapist.